Hello and welcome to Tremaine Sci-Fi. Today we are discussing Isaac Asimov's series Foundation. Now, you may have thought, well, didn't you discuss it last week? Yeah, but we didn't do a very good job of it, so we're doing it again. So, to kick us off, I've lost the questions. To kick us off, Jag, do you remember what the story of Foundation is?
I remember parts. I think my main problem is if I was to, or if you were to ask me, so in which book was it's
Hmm.
like, well, the trilogy probably.
So,
Maybe outside of that.
so if you don't know what Foundation is, for those of you who don't know, it's basically one of Isaac Asimov's most famous series, next to the Robot series, probably. Um, and it was traditionally, I think, a trilogy, and then it got expanded out to prequels, sequels, and all sorts of gubbins that we're not going to get into today because I haven't read it. And I'm not going to. So the Asimov series Foundation. So it starts off with, I believe it's Harry Seldon. Either that or it's someone else. That's
Harry Seldon, yep.
Harry Seldon. He's a psychohistorian. No, what's it
Yep.
called? Yes, psycho.
Psychohistorian, you've got it.
He's an insane historian. No, he's a psychohistorian, and those using mathematics and sociology, they're able to predict the future almost to the letter. But at a certain point, they've realized that the empire is going to collapse, and therefore they need to start beginning a encyclopedia of human knowledge to try and save us from a dark age. And as you get through, there's the first book. There's eras. So there's the encyclopedist era where they're ruled by sort of a council of encyclopedia writers. So it's a technocracy. Would you call it that?
Um, I'd say some parts of Empire are technocracy. There's a different term for it when it's the smart as opposed to like the robots.
Oh, yeah, I can't think of that. So anyway, as I was saying, then it's followed by when they open the vault and it's revealed
Scientocracy, apparently.
Scientocracy. Yeah. So when the vault is opened, Harry Seldon, I can't say his name. Um, when it's revealed that he is planning to build an empire, basically through the Foundation, and so the series follows through with what happens in the different foundation in the Foundation. Then it's revealed there's a second Foundation on the other side of the galaxy that's been preparing in a different way. And eventually they meet and there's a clash, and I can't quite remember because I was quite drunk when I finished the book. And yeah, so I guess that moves us on to some of the ideas of no, some of the themes of Foundation, Jag. So, what would you say some of the central themes are?
It is mainly a political um thing. So competing political systems.
Factions, yeah.
Um, and he also extends this through the other series, of course. Robots has Dawn, which is quite libertarian. Um, Earth and Trantor are very much so more monarchical. Well, at times it's a 10,000 year story, so.
Yeah, and I
Uh,
think something else just to add to that is it also talks a bit about the cycles humanity go through. Just a thought there, but carry on what you were saying. Um,
right. like they say, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. Well, those who know history are doomed to observe it repeated.
Yeah,
Like,
you try telling someone that they're about to be the next Hitler. That doesn't really work out. Um,
yeah,
so
history will repeat regardless. It does also touch on military, or militarism. I think
right.
is the one I'm going for, and also how much of human behavior can be predicted and controlled. So I recall in one of the books, and I hope I'm not accidentally heading into robot. Um, there is a time when everything is controlled by master computer, essentially,
Right.
and to, it could make it perfectly
Hmm.
efficient, but it knows that people won't be. So it leaves open these little loopholes for grift, so that the people who want to grift can see these opportunities and take advantage of them and think they're beating the system when really it's allowed for.
And would you say
Um,
that could be sort of seen as how society works now? That we know not everyone's going to follow through with the rules, but to maintain order, we just let them sort of go off on their own? Or would you say that's the opposite of what we do and we try to control every aspect of society?
a mixture, definitely a mixture. So, and it was already a thing back then. It had already been noticed, of course. But the idea that you have to take into account a realistic level of non-compliance, and so when you're making rules, you'll quite often go a bit harder to account for the people who will be non-compliant, so that their non-compliance doesn't negatively affect everyone.
Right.
Not talking about COVID here.
Oh,
But
shit.
anyway, are we are
uh,
we editing that one out?
no, we'll keep that in. I don't care.
Fantastic.
With
Um,
with Jodar gone, we
so
have no choice. We can do what we want.
we have no moral compass anymore,
We destroyed
or
it.
factual compass.
Yeah, let's talk about the three waters. No,
I can see the comments now. Bring back Joda. Yes, yes, we might.
it's not gonna happen. She just walked out. She was like, I can't believe you
Haven't
can't.
heard from her since.
I can't
Okay,
believe.
we do have to edit some of that.
Anyway, we'll just carry on.
We cannot mislead the public.
No. So
Um,
just to clarify again, Joda is just taking some time off, not because of anything we've said. It's because she's having some personal issues. All right. Carry on. So we were talking about non-compliance in society. So
and predicting
yeah.
unpredictability. I mean,
So
psychohistory is supposed to be this near omniscient
science almost, yeah.
system, yeah. But
And it's, I
it
mean,
is.
at the time, it could have been seen as hard sci-fi because there was the opening fields of psychology, and that's where also the historical context comes in. Asimov was born in 1920, so that would have been 2 years after the Russian Revolution. So that would have been around the time Sigmund Freud had started releasing some of his more controversial theories about how the human mind worked. Um, then, as he was getting into his formative years, Jung would have been more and more prevalent at the time. And we know he was a polymath, which is, I believe, someone who reads pretty widely. So, yeah, he was certainly probably influenced by Freud and Jung and a lot of these people when he was designing psychohistory. Psychohistory. Okay.
Psychohistory.
And I think you can see that. So this idea that he realized his own demise was coming, and the way he wanted to build an empire without having people interfere with it. So that's why there were never any psychohistorians in the first foundation. because they would have been able to predict, hey, wait a minute, this is what he's going to do. And this is what comes into this idea of, are people better off with just a prophecy to guide them? But then we see later on, they start to divert away from the prophecy and start to say, well, that was just, how do we even know he was real? You know? This idea that if something gets far enough away in history, we stop believing it existed.
Yeah, and in real life, there's a sort of a need for something along the lines of foundation. People are looking into how do we convince post-collapse societies to stay away from our nuclear material dumps, for example. I don't know if we've addressed this before. There's a lot of options, and some of them are make a religion.
So, I mean, that's on the idea that we collapse, right? So, I mean, I'm not going to say we're going to go too far into that, but I am quite interested. So the idea would be what? Trying to keep us away from going into the atomic waste and then playing around in it, or developing
Yeah.
weapons, or...
Oh no, just the fact that it would be terrible for mankind to, say, build a city on top of hard radiation.
Oh, okay.
And we want to look after future generations, considering it's our fault that the situation will exist.
Whoa, hold on. It's not our fault, not our generation. It's, even though Jags...
Also, two of us live in a very
Oh yeah.
anti-nuclear
So
country.
if you don't, I'll just give some context for that. So New Zealand in the Cold War said we weren't going to take any nuclear material or power or anything like that during the Cold War, which isolated us from everyone else. But turns out no one wants to invade New Zealand because, I mean, we're not even going to probably put up a fight. We're just going to let you come in, and then you're going to be like, okay, we're running things now. We're going to cool.
What do you mean? We still have gun emplacements to fire on oncoming boats.
Yeah, from World War II, yeah. If you want to have a nice laugh, look up the Bob Semple tank. Bob and Semple, so Semple, because that is a brilliant piece of New Zealand engineering. Back to the topics. So I said before... you said before that politics plays a big part, the political factions play a big part in Asimov's series. So how do you think because his family was Russian Jewish, and they obviously were fleeing from the Soviet regime for whatever reason. We won't go too far into that, but clearly they were probably anti-communists coming from that area, because if you were pro-communist, you probably would have stayed in the Soviet Union. But
Asimov personally was a humanist.
right, and what's that? Sorry.
Just the belief or opinion that humans are the guiding force, the engine behind pretty much everything important, and that it's very atheistic usually. But it can either be quite positive or quite negative. He seems more of the positive sort of, we can collaboratively achieve our goals.
And that can be seen a little bit in this idea that we have people who would be willing to try to stop a dark age, even if it's not going to affect them, even if it's going against the most powerful people at that time. So, like the idea of a dark age, if you don't quite know what that is, because I do know some of our listeners are, and we do have listeners now, which is quite weird. Some of our listeners have told me that they don't know what some of the things we talk about are, but a dark age goes back to after Rome collapsed. There was a time in Europe where scientific advancement was
paused,
non-existent. Yeah, non-existent, even regressive to a degree. We lost a lot of valuable information the Romans had that we never learnt. Some people point to the idea that the Earth is flat from that era. I don't think there's enough evidence for that, but we know that the Earth isn't flat from what the Greeks discovered, the ancient Greeks. I can't remember what the system's called, but it was to do with poles and how it worked. And
They
so
had accurate timekeeping devices,
yeah,
and they put a stick in the ground and went, right, it is midday, right here, right now, it has no shadow. They travelled 1,000 miles another direction, waited till exactly midday, put a pole in the ground, and went, it has a shadow. That means there's an angle. That means I have travelled around something.
right,
And that's it. And they managed to get, I think, like within 2% of the actual diameter of the Earth,
right.
based on the angle.
And if you're going, hey, why aren't you presenting the other facts? Because they're not facts. So basically, yeah, so the Greeks knew a lot, and then the Romans certainly knew a lot. And then we lost quite a bit of that. One, because the Library of Alexandria was also destroyed by. Let's not go into who destroyed it. And then we also have other.
Tremaine, God.
Shut up. I think it was the Christians, wasn't it?
Sure.
Jake's like, I'm not touching that with a 5-foot pole. So yeah, the Dark Ages. Sorry. So the Dark Ages were a horrible time to be alive. Actually, pretty much any time after. Actually, yeah, pretty much any time
Always
other than now is a bad time to be alive. There's some element of life sucking. And if you're going, hey, I would rather live in the 1950s than and listen to the Beatles when they first come out, or whenever it was the 1960s, wasn't it? And instead of living in a pandemic, I'll remind you there was no Wi-Fi, so fuck that.
That is a good point.
And also atomic warfare and blah blah blah, Soviet Union, blah blah blah. Anyway,
Don't worry, we'll look back on this time and go, man, I wouldn't want to live then either.
yeah, exactly. There'll be
Perfect.
people saying like, "Oh, I can't believe people lived through a pandemic," and I'll be like 92, going, "I remember Jag. He was 106 during the pandemic," and I'll go, "How did you know someone 100?" Anyway, so we keep getting sidetracked. So Asimov, as you said, was a bit of a human optimist. So
Yeah.
he believed that humanity was destined for not destined.
No, it has to work for it, but is capable.
But is capable of a greatness. Which I align myself with that too. I think that there's nothing else in this universe so far that can do what we can do. And I mean, I'm one of those people who thinks that if we want to survive, we need to have presences on other planets and have a better control over what we do, of what happens to us. Like, I think it was, I think it's Kurzgesagt, which is a great YouTube channel to watch because they're a lot of fun and I think scientifically accurate. And they were talking about a interstellar
One
engine.
bad episode, but yes.
What?
They did one bad episode and
What
they
was it?
addressed it later.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
They did not sufficiently look into someone's credentials and realize that they were presenting a fringe belief as fact.
Oh, okay. Well, again, anyone can make a mistake. But generally speaking, they're quite a good.
They did address it, so.
So yeah. So an interstellar engine, if you're wondering what that is basically something that would harness the power of the sun and then move the sun at the same time. So basically, if we could because we can predict when or the trajectory of objects in space coming towards us. Theoretically, if we had engines that could push the sun, that would then drag the rest of our planets with it because of orbits and things like that, we'd be able to avoid things like that, which is thinking thousands of years in the future. This is not going to happen in 25 years or 30 years or even 10 years. It's something that would happen so far in the future that we would, if like there would be generations between it, but we would still worry about it. So stuff like that is this idea of being able to predict a problem 10,000, 30,000 years in the future and doing something about it now. Which brings us to climate change. I think generally speaking,
I will jump in to head off the actuallys.
yeah.
That would be a stellar engine.
See, I wanted to say stellar engine, but then I
A
got
stellar engine is an engine that would move a star. Stellar. An
Oh, right, not
interstellar engine
interstellar.
is
Yeah,
for
yeah.
traveling from star to star, which is the
Oh,
classic, say, Bussard ramjet, or
and what's that, Jake?
just a fancy way of gathering stuff and throwing it way behind you so you move the other direction.
Okay, so sorry, a stellar engine. If you were losing your shit while I was talking about that, I thought it was a stellar engine, and then I thought, no, that sounds stupid, so I said interstellar. Anyway, back to the themes and motifs. So I suppose I did enjoy the book talking about that sort of thinking, that sort of generational thinking. And the way that it was written was certainly a lot of fun because it went through different generations. Each chapter was a different generation, or each section of the book was a different generation. There was the generation that was immediately after the Foundation had been founded, then was 30, 40, 100 years after. And it was a wonderful way of exploring what would happen. And it was a lot of fun. And I encourage you to read the book. But moving on slightly, what are some ideas that we get from this book, these books, Jake? Like, can you think of anything in particular? Or?
Anything in particular? Ideas from the books?
Yeah,
It posits the whole, like, planned humanity and planned society is quite a positive thing.
right.
Um, which I'm not hugely in favor of myself. I feel that you have to make these sweeping overviews and then let people work how they want within them. You know,
Right, right.
we make laws that people have to follow, and as long as they do, they can go to school, they can get the education they want for the job they want. We don't really focus down into the you must do this.
It's less of a collectivist ideology and more of an individualistic view, is your view, would you say?
I am more in favor of the individualism or light libertarianism. Um,
Libertarian light. Most refreshing.
mm,
Uh, but again, if you want to talk about this in the comments of the Facebook or whatever, go ahead. It's a lot of fun to talk about. Carry on, Jake.
and as far as I can tell, the planet Aurora is mentioned in either Foundation or Empire, so I think I am allowed to talk about that. That is the. It's an interesting form of a libertarian planet in that everyone is free to do what they want. They've got their own little plot, and no one is allowed to go there. The planet itself is closed to immigration, and it's very much
David Seaman
shows.
was Wet Dream. Yeah.
Yeah, David Seymour would love it. No, it shows that there has to be a balance to things. Not saying that that was a good way of doing it, but that if you want a very homogenous society, you kind of have to be nasty in other ways. You can't
Right.
let people in.
You can't be sympathetic in a way. Because a lot of what immigration, particularly in these books, is saving people from um, worlds that have collapsed, and that may be relevant today. It's been relevant since wars started getting really fucking violent. I mean, you can say, "Oh, this is the Ukraine situation." You could say it's the Syrian situation. You could say it's the Afghan situation. You could say it's a Soviet situation when the Soviet Union collapsed, or even before that when the Soviet Union was founded and a bunch of Russian, Polish, Ukrainian, Belarusian, Baltic people fled their country to try to get a better life in America and the UK, Germany, New Zealand, Australia, all that sort of thing, and then even Yugoslavia. This has been happening for years, so don't. It's not like a new occurrence, but it's this idea that we should be sympathetic and let them in was also an idea that was proposed in Foundation because when the empire's collapsing, when it's collapsing, obviously there's a lot of poverty, crime, there's a lot of things that are going on, and they're wondering whether or not they should let them in because what do you call it? The Foundation is sort of a what would you call it, Jake? Like a semi-autonomous government, kind of.
Yeah, not quite direct democracy because it is still scientocratic. It's sort of a republic over anything else I can compare it to. At least that comes to mind. You're right that it's nothing new. He based it strongly on Edward Gibbon's The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire.
Right.
Um, and so you can look at it as parallels with the Roman Empire falling and people leaving to more democratic, peripheral
Or less democratic, depending
countries.
on what era you're in, because sometimes democracy, when it was in the older eras, was not as effective.
Democratic.
Well, democratic or effective sometimes. If you look at like the Roman Senate during the Civil War with Julius Caesar, very much the gridlock that it got itself into through corruption and things like that is the reason Julius Caesar was able to maintain his popularity and was actually able to win the Civil War. So a lot of it, you're right. A lot of it is to do with how um, that when these major empires start to fall apart, people start to go, well, I'm out, or even just smaller countries that get invaded for no reason.
And
Or
the people who leave are either the ones who have the resources to do so, or the ones who have absolutely nothing, and so there's nothing to lose. Yeah, it's the we're going to die anyway. We might as well try, or the hop on a private jet and sail away happily.
I think it was American Dad who had the episode of yeah, my family and I we escaped from Tehran. All we had was the clothes on our back and $30 million in Iranian currency. And it's that sort of thing. There's usually a story behind what a lot of immigrants do. It usually comes from when they escaped or something like that. But there is instances where people who are quite wealthy have escaped from probably certain death, because generally speaking, when someone takes over, they tend to kill most of the nobles and the aristocracy and
It's all desperation, but the
yeah.
resources certainly vary.
Yeah, you can either leave on a private jet or clinging to the bottom of a boat across the Mediterranean.
Hmm.
Yeah. Any other ideas from Foundation? Sorry, we've sort of got a loose style right now because Joda's not here to keep us in line. Um,
I mean, there's a lot of things it touches on. I'm not sure there's a lot that I took away from it.
well,
For
to give
example,
us
it
some of
does.
the yeah.
Okay.
Sorry.
Later on, he made the addition of castes to the Empire and Foundation
What's that? Sorry.
and Robot. Um, groupings of people that are seen as higher or lower classes.
Oh, cast like that sort.
Castes. Yeah, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
I have that thing where you read a word a lot before you've ever heard it,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, I
so
know what
you
you
have
mean.
this preconception of what a word is, and
You
then you
mean like
hear it and you're
Rockella?
like,
You mean like
yeah,
Rockella?
yeah. Or the plural for octopus.
octopuses.
Octopodes.
Oh, fuck off! Why? That's so good. Alright, carry on, sorry. The
So there is a bit
cast.
of an exploration of the caste system.
Right.
Whether that is on Trantor, where there's the people who they're called heat sinkers. It's an interesting idea of a way to get electricity. You drill a very deep hole, you put a rod down the hole, and the rod gets hot, and you take the heat, turn it into power.
Right.
But you are, of course, sapping the heat from the center of the planet.
Right. Right.
I believe in one of the. I feel like it is one of the Empire or Foundation books because I seem to recall it being Daniel Oliver who was involved in it. There is the sewage workers and how they couldn't arrange things to improve because no one would talk to them, and they had to get an outworlder, Daniel Oliver, to talk to them. But it was also very awkward because as soon as he talked to the sewage workers, none of the upper classes would talk to him, so he had to find out everything first before going on this essentially one-way trip
Jesus
to
Christ.
arrange a negotiation. At which point, spoiler alert, some success, and then just has to leave the planet because there's nothing to be achieved there anymore. Um, he's considered sullied from dealing with the sanitation workers. It's
Which,
really nasty.
which is a classist sort of way that things used to be in a lot of different
Well,
countries.
when it comes to what do I take away from it, he does have an understanding of humanity there, where in a
Hmm.
post scarcity or near post scarcity world, we would still find things to have problems with people about. We'll always in group out group, and at the moment there's many different things that we use, but if we did, you know, abolish, let's say we abolished race, we'd just find something else.
Yeah.
Um,
Which is
and
either you can view it as a cynical way of thinking or a source of maybe where we need to think about mending some of these divides. But
I think it is overcomable in
somewhere.
human society.
My thing has always been if we discover aliens, that's the day that class, race, gender, that all just disappears and we go, right, we're killing these fuckers.
Have, have you heard the saying, "Me versus my brother"? Me and my brother versus a cousin. Me, my brother, and my cousin versus a stranger.
No, I
It sounds
haven't.
better in the original language. It's not a great translation, but I think the point comes through that,
Yeah, it does. This idea that you fight your brother until your cousin shows up. You fight your cousin, then you fight your cousins until some random dude shows up. Yeah, no, I get it.
yeah,
But
so yes, as soon as there's aliens, then mankind will be one.
we'll be like, oh, there's. I think right
And if
now,
we destroy the aliens, we'll go back to fighting, don't worry.
I actually wrote a short story around that idea was that after we had killed off and exterminated an entire alien race, we had this empire, and then we sort of just went right. Um,
Time to
let's
fight each other again.
let's just calm down. And then someone killed the emperor, and then the whole thing fell apart. Which is
It is a common issue of all of this army and nowhere to invade. Um, that specific thing with the alien, uniting mankind was done in Watchmen,
right.
the graphic novel.
I haven't seen that. Oh, read that. Sorry.
They made a movie if you do want to see it.
No, I'll probably
Um,
read it.
oh,
Uh,
okay.
I've
If
got the
anyone listening has gone, "Ooh, this Foundation and Empire sounds interesting," there is also a TV series released last year.
Oh yeah, it says that on the front of the books I got actually. The Apple TV series. Is it any good?
I haven't seen it. My books don't say that for some reason.
Shut up. Okay, so again, Jag is an old man.
Hey,
Old
I
man.
inherited those books.
Oh shit! The only books my family ever read were, well, sorry, my dad and my grandparents ever read were,
The Book
um,
of Mormon.
no, shut
Uh,
up. No, like historical books, which is why I have a library of historical books.
so you would have picked on quite rapidly to the parallels to the fall of Rome.
Yeah, well, sorry,
Or just the Roman Empire in general,
what
how the Rome had the peripheral states, the Empire and Foundation Empire had peripheral planets.
yeah, but I also picked up on the contrast it had between other empires. So,
Yeah, fair enough.
yeah, so, like, for example, the British Empire at one point would have looked like the Roman Empire in that it was the center of industry, of science, of everything. And the idea that one day it wouldn't be there was probably inconceivable to some people.
The sun shall never set.
And then it did. But then we were
It did.
used to the then we were
It.
used to the American and the Soviet empires. And then a lot of people at the time probably thought the Soviets would never disappear. And people nowadays will think the Americans will never disappear. And for the
Um,
sake of everyone in the Middle East, I hope it does.
I will say, with Trantor getting which the new capital of the empire because
Right.
it was galactically central, they gave up on Earth. It
Earth.
was too damaged.
Fuck
Um,
Earth.
so with Trantor, they had to import all their food because it was purely a administrative planet
Right, so
essentially.
sort of like the Soviets with
That
Ukraine and
or
um,
Britain during the British Empire.
or Rome during the with North Africa and actually I think it was just North Africa and Egypt.
Okay, so there was a Roman parallel there.
Yeah.
That was what I was wondering. I definitely saw Britain in that.
Oh, okay,
I mean,
yeah.
you see what they did to Ireland for food.
Sir, we have no food. Keep keep importing, keep exporting. Which is not a good way of running things because then you run the risk of. Well, actually, that happened in the Roman Civil War, as I was talking about before. Was Pompey had control over North Africa and I think the in Asia, well, the Asian part of the empire. And if Caesar hadn't captured that land, they would have starved to death because Rome, they would have had enough to maybe grow for Gaul, maybe for some other Hispania, maybe, but not for Rome. Rome was way too big. Italy was not big enough to have. Yeah, so yeah, there's lots of historical parallels. The Soviet Union, Rome, Britain, I think France to a degree as well. I don't think Paris would have been producing anywhere near enough grain for that. Germany, if you look at Germany during World War One and World War Two, maybe not with food, but certainly with resources, they didn't have the rubber, oil, coal. I mean, when they lost Silesia in the closing era of the war, their coal and oil output dropped from like by three quarters, which is when Albert Speer sent a message to Hitler saying the war is lost, which was kind of true because then they lost the war. But yeah,
And
so
he was writing these from 1940 onwards, so he would have been aware of um,
yeah.
those matters. He was working in a naval shipyard with Heinlein at the time, one of my favorite authors.
Oh, okay. What did he
Yeah,
write?
Heinlein?
Yeah.
Starship Troopers,
Ooh.
Stranger in a Strange Land, Have Spaceship Will no, Have Spacesuit Will Travel. Um, he did a lot of stuff. A lot of it would have been very hard to make into movies or TV shows.
Uh.
Um,
Yeah.
Stranger in a Strange Land is probably his most known work. Starship Troopers because of the movie.
Movie.
Friday, the Book of Job. Not that one, a different one.
I was about to say,
Uh,
yeah.
just double check. Yep, Job, A Comedy of Justice. It's a modern day reimagining of the Book of Job. So what if Job happened in 1984? The
Oh,
real
modern day.
1984,
Yeah.
not
Modern
the
day.
book setting.
Not George Orwell.
Not George Orwell's 1984, actual
I
1984.
love, right? I just spun. Sorry, this is a bit of real life. I just spun around on my chair. I look over at my bookcase. I can see 1984 right where I'm sitting. It's right next to the Necronomicon,
Ah, lovely.
which should tell you how much of a fucking nerd.
I will say one thing I like to do with authors, if I've liked their work enough, is go into biographies and autobiographies. I think first autobiography I read was Roald Dahl's two very conflicting autobiographies, Going Solo and Boy. They cover the same period of time, but very different things happen.
To be fair,
Um,
he was probably quite.
Funny.
Yeah. What era was he? Was he the era of legal cocaine?
Oh, I don't know about that, but I would consider him. I would have considered him almost modern, but he's actually older than Asimov
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
1916 he was born.
Oh,
Um, in Wales to Norwegian parents, so
that's not confusing. Yeah.
an interesting life.
And for
Hence
some
the name.
reason, for some reason, I always thought he was a Kiwi because we learnt so much about him in school, which
He was just so iconic,
which is so
really.
confusing because you think, why are we learning so much about this guy? Is he a Kiwi author? And the teacher went, I don't know.
But it's fun to see how their personal lives were expressed in their works in ways that you wouldn't
Right,
expect. Like with
right.
Dahl, you can see where he got his obsession with chocolate from. It's clearly in his biographies. In we're talking about Asimov, aren't we?
Yeah.
In Asimov's work, he has the rolling roadways. Was that the term for it?
You'd have to
Um,
describe them in order for me to remember.
everywhere they go is on a form of public transport where it's just moving sidewalks.
Right, that sort of thing that you can see in
Uh, I believe that mainly happens on Earth in his books,
right,
but I think at least a lot of that comes from the fact that he couldn't drive.
right, okay,
He relied heavily on public transportation, and so in his vision of the future, there was very good public transportation because he was like, there has to be. With greater crowding, you can't have private vehicles.
yeah, and that's a very good point as well. And we also didn't realize the environmental ramifications
Mm.
of petroleum being used, and yeah, no, that's a very good point. The whole how life influences art and art sometimes imitates life. I mean, yeah, I can't drive either because I don't know. Blame my mother. Which she listens to
Ah,
this, so
so it was part of his robot anthology. It was The Roads Must Roll is when he really goes into the uses the term highways, but they are just conveyor belts. You hop on the first one, it's traveling at 2 kilometers per hour. Next to it's one going 4, and you just go further down and up to the expressway, which is going, like 100 kilometers per hour,
fuck.
and has these great big windshields that you crouch behind.
Oh my god, that sounds amazing, doesn't
And there's a urban sport of basically tag,
it?
and it's terrifying
Yeah, that does sound terrifying.
because people will jump from the 100 kilometers per hour one straight to the 80k and just combat roll.
Oof. And that's something that would have been done in Asimov's time as well. If you think about what trains, trams, I don't know if they had
Oh, you
trams in
you would
America, did they?
some parts. I don't
Yeah,
know if
in
they
New
had them in
York
his
would have,
area, but
because he grew
you
up
would
in
jump
Brooklyn.
onto a tram that was it's just like, oh, that's mine, and you wait for it to come up to you, and you run, and it's outpacing you, and you jump through, and it's madness.
Yeah, it's
Um,
incredibly unsafe, but that's what they did. They had that sort of fun. Yeah, they had fun.
um, so apparently, the idea of the Rhodes must roll in Caves of Steel, he just took from Heinlein.
Ah,
So that yeah, the Rhodes must roll was Heinlein. The Caves of Steel was Asimov.
and what are the caves of
And I
steel?
may have conflated it slightly. Um, so the Caves of Steel is Asimov's book regarding um, just a highly compact Earth. We're talking about 2 billion population cities.
Oh,
Um,
oh, I feel sick.
I have found an example of the multi-speed auto walk, which was actually used in 1890s Paris, which was conveyor belts of varying speeds next to each other for people. And it just has these vertical poles that you come up to about chest height and you hold on to.
Yeah,
And it's
I.
very dainty and terrifying.
Yeah, I
I
can't
will see
imagine it.
about getting that into the Facebook post for this.
Yeah, that'll be good. Yeah, they and remember these all come out on Tuesday 7 a.m. New Zealand time. So if you are interested, just check here every so often. We talk about a lot of random shit. And we also swear apparently. So yeah. I think that's about us today. So, any closing thoughts about Asimov Foundation that you want to add on to, or have we covered everything?
I don't think Asimov has anything I'd recommend skipping. Um, I know with Heinlein, I've said, read in the order he released them and stop when you don't feel like it anymore. When it's no longer your style. Asimov, I think, just did. Well, it's not necessarily banger after banger. He had a great range. So if you're not so much into sci-fi, this is an odd choice of podcast. But he does have the Azil.
Yeah.
Apparently, the correct way to pronounce Azazel, the demon, is Azil. I don't know if that's true. He has the Black Widowers Society, if you prefer mystery. Um, just maybe find a top 5 or top 10 and see if he grabs you. I think he probably will.
One of those to be released on TerrainArchyWriter.com soon. All right. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to check us out on the social medias listed below. TerrainArchy underscore, I think, on Instagram, and then the Tremaine Sci-Fi Hour on Facebook, the page, and some other stuff. Thank you for listening again, and this has been Jag and Tremaine. Thank
I love you all.
you.